Take two. Welcome gamers. Today we're teaching you how to play Terran versus Zerg in 2K20. So I've done a guide how to play Terran versus Terran in 2020 with Bio, how to play Terran versus Protoss in 2020 with Bio. Now we're going to do Terran versus Zerg. So I was just telling my stream, I just did this game on stream. It's against AI because it's kind of like safe environment where I can show you the build itself and not some messy game where random stuff happens and, you know, whatever. So I thought a lot about what build to show you guys. There are plenty of builds in TVZ, and I chose this one because I feel like this is one of the easier ones to execute in TVZ, because I do think that Terran versus Zerg mechanically is the hardest matchup for Terran. Build order wise, especially and macro wise. So I chose this build because it has aggression, it's not that hard on macro, and last but not least, recently, specifically, let me actually put the mic here. There we go. Recently, especially in GSL and like high-level tournaments, the triple CC has been really popular, where they open Reaper Fast Expand and they just go into like third CC before starport. And I do think that build is probably the best at a top highest level, but if you're not playing at that level, you cannot execute the macro as well, and then there's no point to do a build that Maru's doing when you're not Maru, you're Potato, right? So the reason why Terrans at a highest level don't really do any aggressive builds like hellbat pushes and stuff like that, because Zerg's got so good at defending them that you can't really do anything. So with all that in mind, there are different builds. The battlecruiser meta has fallen off a bit, and that's why I will not be showing you a battlecruiser build, because that's something you've probably been doing. So we're gonna take a step back and go back to what we've done quite a lot in the Terran history. So this is going to be a standard supply depot into barracks, then a gas. We're gonna get a Reaper, and then a Marine. So very often people ask me, why don't you SCV scout? If you feel safer, you can SCV scout. With this build, you're going Reaper into a Marine. So if you scout across the map and the Zerg hatchery is not there or it's late, you still have that one Marine, and you can pull a couple of SCVs to defend, you know, if Lings are trying to stop your CC, and you can run back with the Reaper straight away. But again, if you feel safer, feel free to SCV scout around 17-18 supply. But I personally don't do it. It does help, but more often than not, you'll just be wasting minerals. So the moment Reaper comes out, send it across the map, and the first thing you want to scout is if the Zerg expanded or not. That's your first goal. So that's why you're going straight for the natural. Sometimes I see people that have coached in the past, I do not coach currently, they scout the main base, which is always a mistake. You always check the natural first, because sometimes you'll see units moving down, and that's the most important information you can get at this point. If you arrive there and you see that the hatchery timing is late or that there's no hatchery, run back with the Reaper straight away, because there's nothing to scout in the main at that point, right? Like if you see no hatchery here, you're either getting proxy hatched or they're doing one base roach ravager. So there's no point for you to scout in the main. And there's probably Lings on the other side of the map, so just run back. If the hatchery is delayed than usual, it's probably pull first into expand. Doesn't necessarily have to be an all-in, but there'll probably be Lings, so just run back and defend. Try not to lose the Marine. But for the sake of the guide, we'll assume that this is a hatch first from the Zerg. So what we're going to do is, you can always try to hunt down the overlords with your one solo Marine. After the Marine is done, start your reactor, then your factory the moment you have 100 gas. And then after the factory started, you will start your second gas. So at this point, we're just building up, not doing anything specific. If the Zerg is expanding, hatch first. You can try to deny the third base with the Reaper as much as you can, and if, you know, after like 330, 340, the Zerg is not attempting to get a third, then scout the main base with your Reaper. Maybe, you know, it's a Nidus or, I don't know, something else. But around 330, 340, the Zerg third should definitely be there at that point. Now, make sure to always use your mules on your last base. That's something I always tell people. You don't want to throw mules right now in your main because you'll mine it out super quick, and then you're going to have a lot of SCVs just not doing anything. So, next thing. This is finishing. This Marine is probably better to patrol here to deny Overlord scouts. The moment factory finishes and reactor finishes, swap, start producing Hellions. We're going to get a tech lab on the barracks, and we're going to be getting cloak banshees. Now, again, I know that the meta for a while now has been to go for battle cruisers. The reason why I'm not teaching you that is because I think in order to pull off a good battlecruiser build, you need to hit your macro a little bit better than this. There's some certain gas timings and stuff you got to do properly. And battlecruiser is actually really bad against Roach Lingolins because it doesn't DPS fast enough and it doesn't ride fast enough. So going Cloak Banshee is actually a little bit safer and it can defend you against Nidus builds. The moment you build the first 2 supply depots, your 3rd supply depot, and no matter what the map is, put it on your natural and start walling off. Because by the time you move out with the Hellions, you want to make sure that the natural is walled off so you can safely move without getting a counterattack from the Lings. Starport, the moment it finishes, it goes on the tech lab. Now, there's a couple of variations of this, by the way. For example, you can go Viking into Cloak Banshee, you can go Viking into Medivac, and then just one Banshee. You can go Medivac into Banshee. That's up to you. I personally think that going straight into Banshee is the best because it is the safest. If they're all inning you, Banshee will help you way more than the Viking or Medivac will. And it gives you like the fastest attack and the strongest attack. So I would just go straight for Cloak Banshee. You have your Marine, you can produce another 1 or 2 to deny Overlords. And yeah, I'm still producing Reactor Hellions. Still producing this supply depot line. I'll always be producing and building with this SCV right now. Cloak started, Banshee started, as you can see. And you'll see a little timing that I do with my resources. After I start the second Banshee, oh no, it's now, never mind. So after the first Banshee starts and the Cloak starts for it, the next time you have 100 gas, you can throw down an Armory. Because the way it works out, by the time the Banshee comes out and the Hellions move across the map, your Armory is done and you can attack instantly. You don't want to arrive across the map and, you know, have that awkward moment where you can't turn into hellbats because your Armory is late. So, again, when you do these kinds of pushes, timings, whatever it is, you want to do them as fast as possible. And each second you wait, there might be, you know, Banelings morphing, Queens getting transfuses, Roaches coming, whatever it is, you want to hit straight away. Still building supply depots, dropping mules on the natural, Hellions in production. With this Reaper, again, you can scout around, but at this point it's probably going to be dead. And if you know that the Zerg is not all-inning or anything, I wouldn't suggest sending Hellions across the map. Sometimes people get carried away. The AI sent the drone, by the way. Sometimes people get Hellions here, and they're like, oh my god, I can kill drones, and they run in before Armory's done, and then links around and they lose everything. So I'd say just don't risk it. There's no need. You're doing a timing, so just chillax, okay? Still building supply depots. I mispulled this SCV. No supply blocked. Banshee comes out, and the moment Banshee comes out, that's your go. That's your timing to start moving out and go for the push. You can see Armory is about 65-70% done, and by the time you get across the map, it will be finished. Meanwhile, back at home, when you start your second Banshee, that's when you start your tech lab on the barracks as well, because you want to start getting stim and slowly transition into more macro play. So this is not the safest triple CC build, but it is still pretty economical build. You do have good economy off of this. You can see my natural is fully saturated. I'm going to start my third here very, very soon. And this is the point where I would suggest just dropping another supply depot here to fully wall, and you can put this Marine to patrol or to sit here and in case the links come. So, moving across the map, I usually only make 2 Banshees whenever I do this build. I think making more, every time, doesn't matter what race you play, by the way, every time you create harassment units that cause gas, you can technically make as many as you want. So basically, no matter what race you play, whenever you're creating harassment units, whether it's Hellions, minerals, gas, whatever, the way you should look at it is not like, oh, it costs 200 minerals. You're delaying your third, you're delaying your marines, you're delaying your barracks, you're delaying your upgrades by 200 minerals or 100 gas or whatever it is. So that's how you should look at it. So technically you can go for 4 Banshees, but your siege tanks are going to be 200 gas later, which is putting you more susceptible to all-ins. So that's something you need to consider, and that's why I stop at 2 Banshees. And I think I do 8 Hellions total. You can do 10. You can do extra 2 and keep them here to defend any counterattacks or something like that. That's fine as well. But whatever you feel safe with. I've seen some people go with like 12 Hellions. I think 8 to 10 is a good number, and we should probably stick with that. Now, as I'm moving out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this factory, make another reactor. I don't want to put a tech lab on it yet because I don't have enough income and resources to produce tank at this point, because I will be getting stim, other add-ons, and so on and so forth. So, 3rd CC, look how well it plays out. Marine, I'm going to start a Marine soon. I'm going to start stim, boom, and the cloak is about to be done. So, that's how you do the first part of this build and stuff. Now my next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 more barracks, one here, what can I select? One here, and one is going to be here for this reactor. Once the Banshee finishes, I will lift off the starport, make another reactor, and then I will put the factory on the tech lab for siege tanks. Then you're going to follow it up with double engineering bay, double gas in the natural, you keep making supply depots, and you kind of just keep transitioning. Now, the attack. Let's explain that. So, what is your goal with attack? And this is something that is so underrated, I feel like, in StarCraft II. People just don't understand. Why is music not playing, by the way? Every time I pause the game, there's no music. Is that supposed to be like that? Anyway. A lot of people, again, when I coach people, they do stuff, but I have no idea why they're doing them. And they have no idea what they're supposed to do. They're like, well, I've seen this guy do this, so I'm doing it. I'm like, yeah, but you're executing it like potato, right? So what is the goal of this push? Well, obviously you want to try and kill the Zerg, right? But that's, unless you're lower league, that's probably not going to happen. So you have 2 options of point of attack. You can either attack the 3rd, which is in a way safer option, because if you attack from this side, the Zerg can only be on this side. So it kind of gives you a fair fight. I personally prefer to go in between the 3 bases straight away and try to run your hellbats into mineral lines. Now, not Hellions. So what I would do is I would transform hellbats here and I would push in on this side. The reason why I like doing that is because, first of all, you're not going to be fighting around Spore Crawler, which is going to be here on the 3rd or in the natural, right? You're going to fight here. And another thing is, when you attack that fast, you don't give the Zerg time to set up and prepare like you give them on the 3rd. You know, they can let the 3rd take some damage, but if you just show up here, they gotta panic a little bit. So, another great thing about it is, you suddenly are in between 3 rally points from the natural, main, and the 3rd. And especially if they're lower league and not as experienced, they will be losing and bleeding a lot of lings or roaches, completely unnecessary. You can put your Banshee cloaked right here, so it's outside of the spore range. It's just going to do free DPS. Now, what I like to do with the Hellbats, what I mentioned earlier, you're going to be attack moving, move commanding, attack, like stutter stepping basically your Hellbats into the mineral line. Why? Well, if you're going to fight here, right, with the Zerg, why not fight here and prevent them from mining? And also force them to pull drones, and even if you don't kill any drones, you stop the mining. It's the same thing whether you're fighting here or here with the Hellbats. The Banshee's still safe. but you force the Zerg to either lose drones or lose economy by, moving away from the mineral lines. Now, this part, you might be like, well, this one is just better, right? I mean, there's no option. Why would I ever do this one? Again, this one is safer. If you kill the third hatch, you can just move back. You did enough damage. And the Zerg is probably less prepared on the third than on their natural. Now, the risk of going into the natural is, let's say this is all creeped up. If you move in and the Zerg surrounds you from this side and the Banes run in, you lose everything. That's not very likely to happen on the third because you see the units in front of you. While here you can get surrounded. And obviously on another map, you can, maybe it's even more open than this one. You can get surrounded from multiple sides. This is something that I would personally suggest for you guys to try both. Try a couple of games going to the third, try a couple of games going to the natural, see what works out for you, what you prefer. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. I just prefer to be like more in your face against the Zerg and just try to do some economic damage. Because realistically, even if you kill the third, you didn't really do any economic damage if they didn't have any drones there. And if they're all inning you, you didn't do anything, right? You just killed the third. But if you kill the drones in the natural and they're all inning you, at least you ruined the economy a little bit. So, there it is. So you can see the armory finished. Transferring to hellbats, you can turn on cloak, which is going to be done in 3 seconds. So again, the timing works out pretty well. Next thing. Obviously, there's nothing to attack since it's AI. Back at home, like I said, +2 barracks, reactor on the starport, double gas first, sorry, and then double engineering base. So barracks, double gas, and then double engineering bay right here. I will also be uploading this replay, and it's going to be in the description of the YouTube video. So if you guys want to take a closer look at exactly what I'm doing when, you can do that as well. So swapping the factory onto the tech lab when it finishes the reactor building, starting my siege tank production, keeping the supply depot production. This is fully walled off. See this one SCV? He's built all the supply depots and he's still building. Since the third supply depot, I'm continuously producing one supply depot at a time to make sure I don't get supply blocked. Now, my headset is running out of battery, so I've got to make sure I don't get supply blocked there. There we go. So my third's done. Producing mariners, starting my 1-1 upgrades. And I'm still producing siege tanks. I'm going to slowly expand to the third because my natural is fully saturated. And I'm just kind of continuing, economy building up. Soon I will be adding +2 barracks. And there is one difference that depends on your playstyle and what you're used to, which I'll talk about in 1 second. So, the meta recently at a high-level TVZ has been to make about 5-6 siege tanks and kind of push with them, but transition into drilling claws widow mines. Now, you could do that if that's something you want to do, but I would tell you, don't do what top players are doing. Do what you're more comfortable with. So here I'm starting +1 weapons and not armor, because in this game I will be going for double factory production. And if you're a Terran player and you've been playing TVZ and you're playing Bio, if you've always been playing with tanks, like your whole life, continue doing it with tanks. If you're used to widow mines and you want to do widow mines, that's what you should be doing. Because I think both are viable. It just comes down to what you're used to and what you prefer and what you're better with. So whichever one you prefer, you should still open with 3 to 5 siege tanks. Because if they're all ending you with roaches or whatever, you need those tanks to survive. Otherwise, you're just going to straight up die. If you're going the widow mine route after 3 to 5 tanks, just start +1 armor and don't bother with weapon upgrades because you're only going to make a couple of tanks. My stim's done, 2 Medivacs are out, combat shields is out, and often people ask, well, when do I do the next push after I do the hellbat attack? Assuming these hellbats are dead, by the way, because they're probably gonna die. The moment your first 2 Medivacs come out, you can load them up and you can go across the map to try to kill the 4th base, deny creep, and so on and so forth. One thing that you should pay attention to and that should try and save are the Cloak Banshees. Cloak Banshees will have so much value over time. So whenever you do the hellbat push, try not to lose them and try to keep them safe, because they can be used defensively, they can be used offensively again if you repair them up. So try not to lose them. They're not insane DPS, but they will help you, and especially against any kind of like counterattacks after the hellbat push or roach all-ins, they are basically free damage. So yeah. Now, 3rd is set up. The moment I set up my 3rd, I start adding the walls right here, supply depots, and I will also wall off this side. No matter what map you play, always try to wall off your last base. Alright, so here I'm adding another factory, 2 more barracks, gases on the 3rd since I'm fully saturated almost on the minerals. Again, keep up the economy, keep producing supply depots. What does DPS stand for? Damage per second. I drop mules on my 3rd, like I said. Meanwhile, with the double Medivac drop, depending what map you're playing, try to drop near a 4th base and try to deny the 4th base and deny creep. Now, another thing, people are very unaware of what they're supposed to be doing with the drops. Again, most people, when I did coach in the past, I asked them, what is the goal of this drop? Because they drop it at a random place and they're like, I don't know, to kill drones. And I'm like, well, sure, you can say to kill the Zerg, but it's unrealistic. So what you should be doing with these drops, especially with the first 2, if your hellbat attack went really well and you killed a bunch of stuff, you can you can push into the Zerg's 3rd and try to do some real damage. Realistically, the higher league you get, you won't really be able to kill much with these 2 drops. So what your goal is with drops this early in the game is to clear creep for the path where you'll be pushing next with your big army. So if this is Zerg's 4th base, right? Or let's say this is Zerg's 4th. This is their 3rd. So this drop should be dropping this area and clearing creep on this side and on this side. Why? Because after, when you push with your main army, you're going to go there and you want to make sure that there's no creep so you can have an easier time pushing. At the same time, if the Zerg has no 4th and they only have 3rd, well, then clear the creep on the way to their 3rd base, because that's where you'll be pushing with your main army. You want to avoid fighting on creep at all costs, so clearing creep is extremely, extremely important, and it also gives Zerg a lot of vision, so you don't want to, you don't want to have creep everywhere, because then they're going to know whenever you're attacking and so on. What if Zerg mass muta switches? Well, if at this point they mass muta switch, you either did not execute your build at all, or actually, yeah, that's the only thing, because the Zerg at this point cannot mass muta switch. And the reason why mutas are not really popular in the current meta is because A, you can simply just die if you go muta, and B, it's very hard to make mutas because they are very expensive. They're 100. So in order to have an efficient number of mutas, which is like 15, 20, that's a lot of resources to invest when Terran's doing a push with 1-1 and then 2-2. As a Zerg, you can simply die. So that's why people opt for Hydras, because they're more, a brawl unit, right? They can fight the Terran army while the mutas can't. So the Zerg can only go muta if you mess up or they clean up your push really well and then they're ahead in economy. They can never do it when it's an equal game or when they're behind. So that's the point of this marine push. Obviously, if the creep is like up to here, we can just push into the 3rd, try to kill some drones. But whatever you do, do not do like a drop here and then lose both Medivacs. It's not worth. You're only setting up your big push with these first 2 Medivac drops. That's the whole thing. What do you do if your hellbat push goes wrong? You keep playing. You do the same thing you're doing right now. You're just more aware mentally that, okay, Creep's probably going to be farther away. The Zerg is going to have more economy, but you just keep playing. There's nothing you can do. That's how the matchup works. You do the harassment, you try to do as much damage as you can. Whatever happens, you're just more aware. It's not like I'm going to be adding more barracks or more factories depending how my push went. That's not how Terran is played. So, from this point on, walling off my third. Realistically, you want to do your next push when your third is about to be walled off. If it's not fully walled off, don't worry. Don't put like 10 supply depots right here, right now. And usually, and this is basically according to what I just said, depending on how your hellbat push went, you can plan your next move, right? So, let's say you did a lot of damage with hellbats. You can do a push right now. I guess, assuming we don't have these hellbats. You can do a push with 3 tanks, these marines, 2 more Medivacs, and these marines. You can do like a straight up push and try to end the game. If your push went terrible, like absolutely terrible, like the Bannings just ran in and just killed your hellbats completely, what I would suggest is spread out your tanks, defend, use your banshees to patrol around the map, and instead of doing the push, go for 2-2 and +2 siege tank damage. Load all of these marines into these 2 Medivacs, drop them on the other side and clear this side of the creep, and with the other drop clear that side. And then set up your push for big 2-2 timing instead of doing a 1-1 timing, because you kind of got wrecked. But again, if your first push went really well, you can do a 1-1 push and see if you can end the game. That's something that you learn with experience, how well the push did, because I can't give you an exact number. Like if you kill 4 drones, you can push, but if you kill 3, you can't. It becomes based on experience, because sometimes you won't kill any drones, but you're going to kill a crap ton of units, which is effectively like killing drones because they've been using larvae to make units and not drones. So, I'm adding 2 reactors on the barracks, another tech lab on the factory, and again, this is assuming you're going to siege tank round. If at this point you want to go widow mines and you're a widow mine guy, you will be adding reactor on this factory, and you're going to be starting drilling claws, and you will stop the siege tank production, and you will fully go into the widow mines. And when drilling claws is done, you can also swap this factory with one of the reactor barracks, so you can produce 4 widow mines at the same time. And again, if you are going the widow mine route, you should know this, beforehand going into the game. If you're going widow mine route, do not get +1 siege tank weapons, get +1 armor straight away, because they will benefit your widow mines that you'll be producing in the long run. Now here, as I'm moving out with the 1-1, I'm starting my 4th command center, starting my +2/+2, and the moment my +1 finishes, I start +2 vehicle upgrades as well. It's a big push. And again, depending how your game went, depending where the Zerg expanded, you usually want to push the last Zerg base. Not usually, always. You want to avoid pushing into the natural like this, because again, if you push in here, it opens you up to getting surrounded. You can't run away. Your units are kind of funneled here. If there's Ravager Biles, they can shoot you from there. So just avoid that and avoid fighting on creep. That's another big mistake that people do. From here on out, what you do, because this replay is only 30 seconds longer, because this is a TBZ guide. Later on in the game, a lot of things can happen depending on what the Zerg does tech-wise, unit-wise. If the Zerg is going for lurkers, which has been more common recently, you want to start adding liberators. So add another starport, add fusion core, get range for liberators together with siege tanks. If the Zerg is going for lurkers, you also cannot really do a lot of damage with widow mines. You could potentially, you can go widow mine liberator, but siege tank liberator is much more efficient. So depending what league you're playing in, if you meet a lot of lurkers, then go to siege tank route. If you're not, go widow mine route. Your goal from here on out is to continue your upgrades, continue expanding. The moment you finish this, slap another command center. You don't want to stay on 3 base forever. And as it goes into the late game, if the Zerg is going for Broodlords, the good thing about going Siege Tank route is you'll have +2, +3 vehicle weapon damage for Thors. And you'll be able to kind of tech switch to Thors a lot easier with Double Factory, with Tech Labs already. You can add Ghosts into the late game. And people often ask me, what is the best unit comp? Realistically, you want to move away from Siege Tanks in the late game, like super late game, and you want to go with something like Marine Marauder, Medivac, Ghost Liberator, and then like Thors and maybe some Widow Mines, just to prevent Zerg like just swarming with Lings and surrounding your units. And that is pretty much it. This is it for the guide. Again, there are a lot of different builds. There's the triple CC builds, there are battle cruiser builds, but I do think that this build is probably the easiest to execute, no matter if you are, silver or masters player. People often ask as well, is this going to work in Diamond League? Is this going to work in Master League? This can work in Grandmaster League. I've beaten like top 20, 30, 40, whatever GM Zergs with this. This is something we've had for a long time, since HOTS. Some things are a little bit changed, but the point of the build still remains in its core. And you can use this build against whatever Zerg, whatever playstyle they're doing, because it's just an all-around solid opener, safe, and it gives you a good fast third base with a transition. It has it all, baby. I would suggest, tournament started again, and you guys will probably see a lot of triple CC builds before Starport. I would suggest to not do that unless you're like Master 1 player or higher, because those builds are very hard to execute and they're super risky if you don't know what you're doing. If you know what you're doing, they're great and they're probably the best build, but they're super hard macro-wise, so just stick with this. And also, if you're in the lower league, you can actually win a lot of games just by doing this push, because people are much worse at defending pushes, and you can kind of catch them off guard and just beat them down. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. I made a TVP, TVT guide with Bio, and now TVZ. If you would like to see mech guides for all three matchups, let me know. And also, I'm not sure if I should be doing the mech guides next or the Protoss guides next, like one guide per matchup. Let me know. And if there's any other kind of video you guys want to see, whether it's a guide or gameplay, let me know in the comments below. Like the video, or else I will switch to Zerg full time. And we don't want that, okay? We don't want that to happen. Thank you guys for watching. If you're watching YouTube, for you guys on Twitch, let's keep going, baby.